Okay, I'm back again, and I'm going to demonstrate how to use the class library with a web application. So we're going to use web forms, and in getting things set up, I have gone to a specific location on my hard drive, to a specific location in the file system, and I've created a folder called Web Demo CLS Math. That is an empty folder at this point. Okay, so I did that in advance of creating the web project, and you'll see why here momentarily. Next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and launch Visual Studio, and this time I'm going to, from the File pull-down menu, choose New Website, and I'm going to choose an ASP.NET empty website, so it's going to give me just the bare minimum contents. It wants to put it somewhere. I'm going to browse for that location that I want right here and tell it to open, and at this point the file path is shown down here at the bottom. I'll say OK to that. And when Visual Studio actually starts up and provides me with, the capability to build this thing, I have an empty solution, more or less. There's one configuration file. I don't really know what's in there. It's just some overhead Microsoft stuff. And what I want to do is create my first web page, okay, my one and only web page. So I'm going to create, I'm going to add a new web form. Okay, so I'll hold that for just a second. So I right-clicked in the Solution Explorer window, and from the pop-up chose Add, and I'm about to choose Web Form. Wants to know what to name it. I can name it whatever I want. Index and default are common names, so I'm just going to go with the default value, default. And at this point I have a web page. Now you'll notice, if you know anything about HTML, this looks a lot like HTML. It's server-side HTML. So real quick, explanation of what's going on here, and I don't want to spend much time with it because this is not, the focus of what I'm trying to do. But you're looking at a web page that is going to contain a combination of HTML, client-side HTML, and server-side HTML. So some of the HTML elements can be tagged, can be given attributes that say run at server. And so when this web page is ultimately invoked by the client, it will execute on the server, and the tags that have the run at server attribute will execute and be transformed then into standard client HTML. So there's some things that I might want to do at the server in order to generate this dynamic, customized HTML that's eventually going to be delivered back to the client. Along with any HTML elements that are marked run at server, it will also execute what's called the code behind. Okay, so if I go over here to the designer pane, which is empty right now, and I believe if I just double click on that window, then, and if I expand this, you'll see that there is another file that has a .css, has a .cs file name extension, and this is a file that contains, in our case, C# code, very, very similar to the code that you write when you create a Windows application. And when that web page gets called up on the server, besides executing any HTML elements that have a run at attribute, it's also going to execute any C# code. And ultimately, the tags that are server-side HTML and the C# code will execute, and the output will be used to create a dynamic HTML page, and that's what's going to get sent back to the client. So there's some execution of code on the server to create a dynamic, customized HTML page that ultimately gets sent back to the client. And from the client's perspective, they never see anything except standard, in this case, HTML5. Okay, so we'll take a look at that code here in a minute, but there's HTML running at the server, and there is C# running at the server before that all gets bundled into a customized dynamic HTML page and then sent back to the clients. The client's getting a customized page delivered. All right, so what I want to do here is go back to the designer window, and I want to go to the toolbox. Now I'm going to hit the enter key, and I'm going to create just an absolute minimal kind of interface. Okay, so I'm going to create 2 text boxes and a button. Okay, so I'm going to drag a text box out, and this is text box 1. Okay, and I'll hit the enter key a couple times. I'm going to do a Control C and a Control V and paste, and that's going to give me text box 2. I'm going to hit the enter key a time or 2. Going back to the toolbox, I'm going to create a button, drag it out, drop it. I'm going to try to move this button down. This is always painfully difficult. Okay, all right, wasn't so bad. And I'm going to expand this. So this is very much like the designer window when you create a Windows application. It's a bit clunkier, but nevertheless, same idea. You can adapt to it pretty quickly. All right, so with that button highlighted, I go over to the property window and double click and change this to truncate. Okay, so I'm changing the text property on this button, same as you would do otherwise. Now I could put labels. I could do a lot of fancy stuff. You know, I could have indicated, you know, this is the type double input and this is the precision value. I just, to speed things along, am doing this as quickly as possible, just cutting to the chase here. And the other thing I need to do then is set a reference to my DLL file. So if I look at the code here in C#, there's not much there, okay? Very minimal code, yet I want this thing to eventually allow me to input here, click, and then assign the modified value back to text box 1. But right now, there's not much code, so what am I to do? First thing I'm going to do is go to the pull-down menu labeled website, and I'm going to add a reference, and I'm going to navigate to the location where my DLL file is. Now it so happens to be the path is already set up because I tested this prior to turning on the video recorder. I've done this once before, so it's remembering the path where I found the DLL file previously. I'll just go ahead and select that and say add, and then say OK. Okay. At that point, I have now set a reference to that DLL file. The DLL file is going to be available to this Windows web app, or this web application. I'm going to hit the enter key, and if things have worked out, it should know about this path using CP. It understands CPSC dot. It knows that part of the namespace. It knows that part of the namespace. That is the complete namespace. I should then, below the class header, be able to create a private variable, private CLS math space obj math equal new CLS math. That, okay, so now I have a class level variable that's going to be used as my object when it instantiates this class. I'm going to go to the button click event method. I'm going to do a control V and nothing happens. Darn. I saved this previous line of code thinking I could speed things up, not have to type it. Sorry about your luck. You're going to have to watch me type this, and it's going to be painful. So I'm going to be assigning to text box 1. Okay, so it shows up. Now, one of the things that's kind of interesting is that in Windows applications in C#, the default object names begin with a lowercase character. When you create web forms, the default object names begin with uppercase characters. So instead of that being lowercase t text box 1, it's uppercase t text box 1. It has a text property, as you're aware of, and I'm going to assign to it the return value from obj math dot. There is a trunk method, and it requires 2 parameters. So this is the method I wrote, and it shows up in the IntelliSense, and it says the first argument needs to be a type double. So I'm going to take the contents of text box 1 using the .NET convert object. So it now shows up in the IntelliSense. I'm going to convert the contents of text box 1, the text property, and all that becomes my first argument. The second argument needs to be an integer, and so I'm going to convert the contents of text box 2 okay, and that's more than just convert. I don't know what I'm doing here. Convert dot to double here. Convert dot to. I don't know why the IntelliSense isn't showing up. I'll go back. I told you it's going to be painful to watch me type this. Worse than painful, it's pathetic. Convert dot to int32. Now we try it again. Text box 2 dot text. There's my second argument, which is integer. Okay, and I need to close off that entire trunk method here. Now that's returning a type double, so in order to assign it to the text box, I've got to do one last conversion to string. Oh, if I could have just saved that on the clipboard, you wouldn't have had to watch me type that in. Okay, so while I've got there, let's just review. It's a return type method, return type public method from object obj math. Okay, the method name is trunk, and it requires 2 parameters. The first parameter has to be type double, so I'm taking the contents of text box 1, converting it to double. Second parameter has to be integer. I'm taking the contents of the second text box, converting it to integer, and the method is going to return a double, so I have to convert it to string to ultimately assign it to text box 1's text property. Whew. Okay, let's run it and see what we've got. Okay, let's do a quick check. I've got my using statement in, obviously, because the IntelliSense is showing up. I've obviously got the code to instantiate that that class, and I've got the line of code that's going to get executed upon button click. So I'm going to run it, and you'll get this warning. Go ahead and choose the option run without debugging, and it will run it in a development browser and web server. Okay, and so here's my form, pretty minimal. I type in something like 45.98765, and I put in a precision value of 3, and that should return 45.987 to this location, 45987 to this location, and I was successful in using that same class, that same DLL file from my class library in both a Windows application and a web application. And that's my demonstration for today. Thank you.